Hey everyone, and welcome back to the distance learning version of our course. Today we're going to talk about external world skepticism. So first we're going to talk about what we mean by external world, what skepticism is, and then some arguments on why one should be an external world skeptic. And there are multiple sort of skeptical scenarios that we'll talk about a little bit, but the core argument is going to be basically the same for all of them. So first things first, what is the external world? Well, the external world is just everything that is external to your mind. Or another way to phrase it is that it's the sum total of all of the things that are outside of your mind. So an external object is something that exists out there in the external world, outside of your own mind. So for example, tables and chairs and rocks and trees and dogs and other people are all external objects. They are all external things. They're all part of the external world because they all exist outside of your mind. Now, some things are not external objects because they're in your mind. Feelings are not external objects. Your experiences, your phenomenal consciousness types of things, if you remember the mind-body dualism discussion, your experiences, those are inside your mind. Ideas you have, thoughts, those are internal. Those are things that exist inside your mind. But other people and tables and chairs and dogs and cats, those electrons, houses, molecules, those all exist outside of your mind. And for the purposes of external world skepticism, your own body is an external object because your body exists outside of your mind. You know, your hands are not part of your mind. Your hands aren't in your head. They're outside of your head. They are external to your mind. So for the purposes of our discussion here about external world skepticism, even your own hands count as external objects. Everything that's not just inside your mind counts as an external object, part of the external world, right? So that's what the external world is. So then what's external world skepticism? Well, skepticism about X, about some topic, some object, is the view that we don't or can't have any knowledge about X. So if you're a skeptic about morality, then you think we can't have moral knowledge. We can't know what's morally right and morally wrong. And that's a view that some people have. It's a little different than moral nihilism, because it doesn't say that there are no moral facts. It just says if there are moral facts, we can't know what they are, right? To be a skeptic about mathematics would be to say that we don't or can't have any knowledge about mathematics. We don't know for sure that 2 + 2 = 4. Now, I don't know if anyone's ever actually been a skeptic about math, but that's a view one could have. That's at least a coherent view, even if I don't see any justification for the view. So you can be a skeptic about lots of different things. But external world skepticism is specifically skepticism about the external world, or skepticism about external objects. So external world skepticism is the view that we cannot, or at least do not, have any knowledge about the external world. We don't know anything about the world outside of our own minds. So that means we don't know that chairs exist. We don't know that other people exist. If external world skepticism is true, then you don't know that your own hands exist. You don't know that your parents exist. You don't know that your house exists, your apartment exists. You don't know that there's any such thing as a tree, because trees are external objects. And if we don't have any knowledge about the external world, then we don't have any knowledge about trees, including whether or not they exist. So external world skepticism is a very strong view It says we don't have any knowledge about the external world, about anything outside of our own minds. If external world skepticism is true, you don't even know that you have hands, because your hands are external objects. And if you don't know anything about external objects, then you don't know whether or not your hands exist. So it's a strong view. So why be a skeptic? Why would anyone endorse external world skepticism? Because that's a crazy strong view to say you don't even know that you have hands. You don't know that there's any such thing as a tree. You don't know that owls exist. You don't know that there are other people besides you. That's a strong claim. And the main reason, historically, that people have argued for and defended external world skepticism is that it seems like everything we know about the external world comes from our senses. Our eyes and ears and nose and mouth are our perceptions of the world, our sense organs. That's where we get all of our information about the external world. It all comes from sight and sound and smell and taste and touch, etc. But those senses can be untrustworthy sometimes. You can hallucinate. There can be auditory hallucinations. There can be visual hallucinations. I don't know if there can be olfactory, like smell hallucinations, but I don't see why there couldn't be. So your senses can lie to you sometimes. There can be illusions. There can be hallucinations. There can be cases where your senses lead you astray, where they are mistaken. We've all seen optical illusions before. We've all seen that one where it's the two lines, and then on the edge of the top line, the little things go out, and on the edge of the bottom line, the things go in, and one line looks longer than the other, even though they're the same length. Or there are lots of color-based optical illusions too. If you've never seen an optical illusion, I encourage you to Google it. It's kind of fascinating. They're very weird, but they're kind of cool. And your senses can lie to you, is the upshot here. And given that they can lie to you, it's at least possible, it's logically possible, it's conceivable that your senses might be lying to you all the time. If your senses can be mistaken sometimes, it seems like maybe they can be mistaken all the time. But if they're mistaken all the time, then everything you believe about the external world is false. And so that's going to be the strategy here in these arguments we're going to look at, in these skeptical scenarios. There's a hypothetical case, hypothetical scenario, where everything you believe about the external world is false, where you have all the same beliefs about the external world that you have now. But in this skeptical scenario, all of those beliefs are false. And the argument's going to be, you have no evidence that you're not in the skeptical scenario. For all you know, you might be in the skeptical scenario. So if you don't know you're not in the skeptical scenario, then you don't know anything about the external world. So that's just the basic structure of the argument. We're going to go look through the cases sort of one by one here, at least briefly. And hopefully it'll get clearer as we go through different cases. So the first one is dreaming. And the dreaming argument, Descartes considers it in the Meditations. Zhuangzi was a Taoist philosopher from many centuries ago. And they both sort of had this thought. And the thought goes like this. We all dream sometimes, and when we're dreaming, we don't realize that we're dreaming. Now, maybe some people do. Sometimes it's called lucid dreaming. That's a fascinating thing. I encourage you to look that up too if you don't know anything about it. It's interesting. But most dreaming is not lucid. Most dreaming, you don't know that you're dreaming. And so while you're dreaming, while you're asleep and dreaming, you think that everything that's happening to you is real. You think it's really happening to you. But it's not. It's all made up. Your brain is basically hallucinating on a regular basis. It's all an illusion. It's all made up. None of it's really happening. But in the dream, you think it's happening. So, how can you ever be certain that you aren't dreaming right now? right? That's the question. How can you know that you're not dreaming right now? Now, maybe watching a YouTube video of someone talking about external world skepticism and talking about dreaming would be a weirdly boring dream for you to have. It'd be a pretty boring dream. No questions, no judgment there. But we have boring dreams sometimes. It's possible to have boring dreams. Maybe this is a dream. Maybe you're dreaming right now. Maybe you're asleep and this isn't happening. You're not watching a YouTube video. You're unconscious in a bed. If you were dreaming this, if this was a dream, you would be just as confident that you are awake as you are right now. So, given that if you were dreaming, you would have all the same evidence, you would have all the exact same experience, and you would be just as sure that you were awake as you are right now, how do you know that you are awake right now? What evidence do you have that you're awake that you wouldn't have if you were asleep? If you were dreaming this, what evidence would you lack in that case that you have in this case? What evidence do you have that shows you that you're awake now? Because for something to be evidence that you're awake, you can't have that same evidence when you're dreaming. Otherwise, it's not evidence that you're not dreaming. And that's what we want. What we want here is evidence that we're not dreaming. And it looks like we don't have any, and maybe we can't have any. Because no matter how rich and detailed our experience is while we're awake, our brain could cook up that same experience while we were dreaming, while we were asleep. And we would be just as confident that it was real in the dream as we would be having that experience in real life while awake. So it looks like you don't have any evidence you're not dreaming. You don't have any reason to believe that you're awake, or at least you have no reason to believe you're awake that you couldn't also have if you were dreaming. So it looks like you don't know that you're not dreaming. And if you don't know that you're not dreaming, then you don't know that all this stuff is real. Everything that's happening right now is real. Because if you are dreaming, then none of it's real. None of your experiences you're having right now are real if you're dreaming. So if you don't know that you're not dreaming, that means you might, for all you know, you might be dreaming. And if you're dreaming, then the experiences you're having right now are not real. So, for all you know, the experiences you're having right now might not be real. So that's just sort of one skeptical scenario. Dreaming. You might be dreaming. The argument goes, at least, for all you know, you could be dreaming right now. And if you're dreaming, then the experiences you're having right now are false. The beliefs you have about what's happening around you right now are false. Because you believe you're awake and watching a YouTube video, and in fact, you're asleep and not watching a YouTube video. So what you believe about what's happening right now in the world around you is false. Right? So that's one case. But it doesn't get us full skepticism. And this is what Descartes talks about. Descartes says when he's dreaming, when he's asleep, his dreams can only get so far removed from what the real world's actually like. When he dreams things, he dreams tables and chairs and other people from his life and stuff, things that are based in reality in some way. And so Descartes thinks we can be way more skeptical than maybe I'm dreaming, maybe I'm not right now. We can have a much sort of deeper and broader skepticism than that. And that's the evil demon. So Descartes says, look, maybe, for all I know, maybe there's an evil demon deceiving me. A powerful evil demon whose only goal in life, I don't know if demons are alive, whose only goal in demon existence is to deceive me, to make me have false beliefs about the world. Why does the demon want to do this? Who knows? That's not really the point. Descartes thinks that as long as it's possible, as long as it's logically possible, as long as it's conceivable on some level, then we can't rule it out. with like logic and math alone. So Descartes thinks if there is an evil demon whose only goal is to deceive you, to make you have false beliefs, the evil demon might be able to get you to hallucinate, and not just visual hallucination, auditory hallucinations, a whole package of sensory experiences as if the world were one way, roughly the way you believe it is. When in fact, the world is very different. The evil demon's deceiving you in a wide variety of ways, so that everything you experience is just a hallucination inflicted on you by this demon. All of your experiences in this scenario, the evil demon scenario, all your experiences are false. They're inaccurate. They're hallucinations. So everything that you think you've seen in your life was a hallucination. All of your memories implanted by the demon. Hallucinations, false memories put there by the demon. Everything you've ever experienced is a lie. In the evil demon scenario, where in this scenario, an evil demon is very powerful, omnipotent if you want it to be omnipotent, and its sole goal is to make you have false beliefs, to deceive you about what the world is like. And Descartes thinks such a demon is logically possible. So we can't prove by math and logic alone that the demon isn't real, that we're not in the evil demon scenario. And he thinks we can't rule it out by our sense perceptions, because our sensory perceptions, if we were in the evil demon scenario, would be exactly the same as they are now. The evil demon could get us to hallucinate all of the same sensory experiences we're having now. And again, this is not just visual. This is touch, this is smell, this is taste, everything. So if you're thinking, I know I'm not hallucinating the computer or phone in front of me because I can reach out and touch it. Well, the evil demon can artificially give you touch sensation hallucinations so that you feel like you're touching something when really there isn't anything there that you're touching. So all of our senses are open to deception, Descartes thinks. All of our senses could be deceived by the evil demon. So we can't rule out the existence of this evil demon with logic alone. Logic alone won't tell us that we aren't in the evil demon scenario. And our sensory organs, our sense perceptions, will not tell us that we aren't in the evil demon scenario. But if that's true, then we have no evidence that we're not in the evil demon scenario. We have no evidence that there's no demon. Because if there were a demon, our senses would tell us the same thing they're telling us now. And logic alone won't rule out the demon. So if empirical sensory experience doesn't rule out the demon, and logic doesn't rule out the demon, well, then there's no way to rule out the demon. Those are our only options, and they don't work here. So we can't rule out the possibility of this demon. We have no evidence that there isn't a demon. And so Descartes thinks that means we don't know that there isn't a demon deceiving us. To know that there isn't a demon deceiving us, we would need some kind of evidence. But we have no evidence. We can't have any evidence. So therefore, we don't know that there's no evil demon deceiving us. But if there's an evil demon deceiving us, then everything we know about the external world is false. All of our experiences of the external world have been a lie. All of them. So there might be no tables and chairs, no trees. That could have been made up by the demon as a joke. Maybe the demon thought trees were funny for some reason. Maybe there are no trees. Your friends and family don't exist. George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, never happened. Dogs, not a thing. Whole world is very different than you think it is in the evil demon scenario, because everything, all of your experience of the external world has been a lie. So the external world could be wildly different than you think it is. So in the evil demon scenario, all of your beliefs about the external world are false. So if you don't know that you aren't in the evil demon scenario, if you can't rule it out, if you don't know that that's not happening, then you don't know that any of your beliefs about the external world are true. Because if the evil demon scenario is real, then all of your beliefs about the external world are false. So if you don't know that you're not in the evil demon scenario, then you don't know that your beliefs about the external world are true. And that's just a long-winded way of saying you don't know anything about the external world. And that gets us external world skepticism, straightforwardly. Because that just means we don't know anything about the external world, and we can't know anything about the external world. Right? So that's the evil demon scenario. There's also a more modern version, which is called the brain in a vat scenario. And the brain in a vat scenario is basically the evil demon scenario, but without the demon. Think of it like the experience machine, if you remember that from utilitarianism. Or think of it as The Matrix, if you've ever seen that movie. Which, if you haven't, I recommend it. It's a little weird, but it's worth a watch. So the brain in a vat scenario. In this scenario, you are just a brain plugged into a computer simulation. And your brain is fed electrical signals that perfectly mimic the electrical signals that would be sent by the sense organs if you were a human being walking around in the world having normal experiences. So your brain, in the brain in a vat scenario, gets sent the exact electrical signals that your actual brain gets sent walking around in the real world with your actual sense organs. So in the brain in the vat scenario, your brain is getting the exact same electrical signals sent to it that your brain is being sent here in the actual world inside your skull. So, in the brain in a vat scenario, your brain thinks that it is a person with a human body walking around, eating lunch, watching philosophy lecture videos on YouTube, doing all the things that we normally do. In coronavirus times, we're not doing lots of the things we normally do, but doing all the things that one can normally do during these weird times that we're in. So, in the brain in a vat scenario, your brain gets all of the same perceptual experiences, all of the same sensory experiences that you have here in the actual world, walking around as a person with a human body. But it's all false, because the brain's not a person or in a human body walking around in the actual world. It's in a computer simulation, being fed electrical signals by a computer. So, all of your brain's beliefs in this brain in a vat scenario are false. It thinks that it has a human body. It doesn't. It thinks it's taking philosophy 1500 major issues. It's not. It thinks that it is sitting in a chair. It's not. It's in a vat hooked up to a computer. All of its beliefs about the world around it are false. And in the brain in a vat scenario, we might say, or we might assume, it's a thought experiment, we can set up the parameters however we want, that in that scenario, there are no tables and chairs, there are no trees, there are no cats, dogs, other people, etc. That's all completely made up for the computer simulation. It's all been invented for the computer simulation. None of it's real. None of it exists in the actual world in this scenario. So in that case, the brain in a vat has all false beliefs about the world. It believes there are cats, it's wrong. It believes there's such a place as New York City, it's wrong. It believes that there are human bodies, it's wrong. Everything it believes about the external world is wrong. It believes it's not a brain hooked up in a vat. Wrong. All its beliefs are wrong. But in the brain in a vat scenario, the brain has the exact same evidence that you have now in the actual world, because the brain got the exact same electrical signals sent to it. So it had the exact same perceptual experiences. So whatever evidence you think you have about the external world, the brain in the vat has the exact same evidence. However good you think your evidence is that you have hands, the brain in the vat has the exact same evidence and doesn't have hands. So, given that the brain in a vat has all of your evidence and is wrong that it has hands and that there are tables and all that stuff, then you don't have knowledge that you have hands and that there are tables and things like that. Because you have the same evidence the brain has, and the brain is wrong. You don't know that you are not a brain in a vat. Because if you were a brain in a vat, you would have all of the same perceptions that you have now. So, you have no evidence that you're not a brain in a vat. If you were a brain in a vat, all of your experiences would be exactly the same, and you would have all the same evidence about the world that you have now. So none of your experiences count as evidence against the claim that you're a brain in a vat. Because if you were a brain in a vat, you'd have all those same experiences and all that same evidence. So you don't know that you're not a brain in a vat. But if you're a brain in a vat, then all your beliefs about the external world are false. So, therefore, you don't know anything about the external world. Because you don't know that you aren't a brain in a vat. And if you're a brain in a vat, then everything you believe about the world is false. So you don't know that anything you believe about the external world is true. That's the argument. You don't know you're not a brain in a vat. If you don't know you're not a brain in a vat, then you don't know anything about the external world. Therefore, you don't know anything about the external world. So that's the argument. And there's also, in the lecture notes and the lecture slides, there's another version called the Boltzmann brain, which is similar to the brain in a vat. It's worth looking at, I think, if you're not convinced by the brain in a vat or evil demon or dreaming scenarios, but it's a little more complicated, and so I'm not going to test you on it or anything like that. But it's worth looking at, I think, if you have the time. But we're not going to talk about it. All right, so that's external world skepticism. External world skepticism is the view that you don't know anything about the world outside of your own mind. And the argument is that there are lots of scenarios where you could have all the same evidence you have now and be wrong. You have no evidence you're not in those scenarios, so you don't know anything about the external world. And on Tuesday, we'll talk about G.E. Moore and his attempt to prove that there is an external world, to prove that we do have knowledge about the external world. And we'll talk about whether or not that's successful. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, stay safe out there.